Hi, I'm his fiancée.
Oh, perfect. Everyone's here now.
I'm Jake, 29 years old, and up until recently, I'd been married to Rachel for 3 years. What I'm about to share happened last Christmas, and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I missed, but in the moment, I genuinely believed I was overreacting to minor things. Turns out my instincts were sharper than I gave them credit for, and I should have trusted my gut from the very beginning. Every year, my family does Christmas at my parents' house. It's been this way since I was a kid. It's tradition, the kind of tradition that feels warm and comfortable like an old blanket. My mom goes completely overboard with decorations, covering every available surface with wreaths and garlands and those little ceramic Christmas villages. My dad commandeers the living room TV for football from the moment we arrive until dessert is served. My sister Monica brings her 2 kids who tear through the house like tiny tornadoes, leaving a trail of wrapping paper and cookie crumbs in their wake. It's chaotic and loud and messy and exactly what the holidays should be. This past year was supposed to follow that same comfortable, predictable pattern until Rachel decided to throw a grenade into our plans about 14 days before Christmas. We were in the kitchen on a random Tuesday evening in early December. Nothing special about the night whatsoever. I was cooking spaghetti with marinara sauce, one of the few dishes I can actually make well, and she was sitting at the kitchen table glued to her phone like usual, scrolling through something that had her completely absorbed. Then suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, she announced she'd invited Daniel to join us for Christmas dinner at my parents' place. I literally stopped stirring mid-motion and asked her to repeat what she'd just said, because I couldn't have possibly heard her correctly. Daniel, as in her ex-boyfriend Daniel, the guy she dated for 3 years in college. She confirmed it without even bothering to glance up from her screen, explaining in this casual, almost dismissive tone that he was going through some really difficult circumstances right now and didn't have any family living nearby. So she thought it would be a kind and generous gesture to include him in our holiday celebration. Let me give you the complete backstory on Daniel, because it's important context. He and Rachel dated throughout their entire college experience for roughly 3 years, maybe a bit longer. They split up approximately 6 months before Rachel and I started seeing each other, so the timing was pretty close. She's always insisted they remained platonic friends after the breakup, and that they'd parted ways amicably without any drama or hard feelings on either side. I've only encountered Daniel in person twice during our entire marriage. The first time was at some backyard cookout that mutual friends threw 2 summers ago, and the second occasion was at a charity fundraiser last spring, where Rachel had volunteered to help organize. Both times he seemed polite enough on the surface, nothing overtly wrong with his behavior, but there was this weird, uncomfortable vibe between him and Rachel that I couldn't quite put my finger on. They had this way of communicating that felt exclusionary, like they were speaking in a language I wasn't privy to, sharing memories and inside jokes that deliberately left me on the outside looking in. I remember feeling oddly uncomfortable both times, but dismissing it as just me being insecure or jealous for no good reason. I set down the wooden spoon and asked her directly if she'd seriously invited her former boyfriend to my family's Christmas celebration without consulting me first, without even mentioning it to me before making this decision. That's when she finally looked up from her phone, and I could see this flash of annoyance cross her face. She told me not to act insecure about the situation, that I was being childish and unreasonable. She emphasized that she and Daniel were strictly friends now, nothing more than that, and that I needed to stop being so possessive and jealous. Then she dropped the bomb that really stung. She'd already cleared this entire thing with my mother, who'd apparently given her blessing for Daniel to attend. That detail really hurt more than I expected it to. She'd gone completely behind my back to my own mom before even mentioning this to me, her actual husband. I asked when exactly she'd had this conversation with my mother, trying to keep my voice level and calm. She said it was yesterday afternoon, explaining that she'd called Mom to ask if we could bring an additional guest and had explained Daniel's supposed difficult situation. According to Rachel, my mom had been completely understanding and supportive of the idea, even saying it would be nice to have another person join us. I felt my whole body tense up, my jaw clenching involuntarily. I told her the issue wasn't whether my mom approved or not, but that she absolutely should have discussed this with me first before making any plans. Inviting an ex-partner to a family holiday seemed wildly inappropriate and weird and uncomfortable. She shot back that it was only weird if I chose to make it weird, that Daniel was struggling after a difficult relationship breakup, and she was simply being a supportive friend during a hard time. Then came the phrase that would later come back to haunt her. She looked me directly in the eyes and told me I needed to be mature about this whole thing. That phrase, be mature, felt like a slap across the face, like I was some unreasonable child throwing an irrational tantrum instead of a husband who had perfectly legitimate concerns about his wife's unilateral decision involving her ex-boyfriend. But I was tired of arguing about it, and part of me wondered if maybe I was being paranoid and oversensitive. So I told her fine, he could come to Christmas dinner. She beamed at me with this huge smile and thanked me enthusiastically, saying she knew I'd eventually understand and come around. But I didn't understand at all, not even remotely. I just nodded and went back to stirring the pasta while my brain started racing with questions and doubts and this gnawing feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. Later that night, probably around 1 a.m. after Rachel had gone to sleep and was snoring softly beside me, I did something I'm not particularly proud of, though I don't regret it either given what I discovered. I carefully slid out of bed, grabbed her phone from the nightstand, and went into the bathroom. I went through her phone systematically, checking her messages. I'm fully aware that this constitutes a massive invasion of privacy and a betrayal of trust between spouses. But my gut was screaming that something wasn't right, and I needed confirmation one way or another before I completely lost my mind questioning my own sanity. What I discovered was significantly worse than anything I'd imagined in my most paranoid moments. Rachel and Daniel had been messaging each other constantly, multiple times daily for the previous 2 months straight. While nothing in their conversations was explicitly sexual or physical in nature, the tone was far too intimate and familiar for people who claimed to be just casual friends. There were countless inside jokes that I'd never heard them reference in person. Nostalgic, remember when we used to messages about their college relationship? And most disturbingly, Rachel was complaining about me extensively to him. Long paragraphs about how I didn't understand her, how I was too controlling, how I wasn't adventurous enough. Reading those messages felt like being punched in the stomach repeatedly. One particular exchange from about 3 weeks prior made my blood pressure spike dangerously high. He'd written something along the lines of how he missed what they used to have together, that things had been simpler and better back when they were dating. Her response? She agreed completely and admitted that sometimes, especially lately, she wondered what might have happened if they'd fought harder to make their relationship work instead of giving up so easily. She said things like, I think about that sometimes too, and we were good together, weren't we? I took screenshots of everything relevant, probably 30 or 40 different conversations, forwarded them all to my own phone, then carefully deleted any trace or evidence that I'd been snooping through her messages. I cleared the sent folder, cleared the search history, made sure everything looked exactly as it had before. Then I slipped back into bed, but I didn't sleep at all the rest of that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, processing what I'd found and trying to decide what to do about it. The next day, I started doing some investigative research on my own. I looked up Daniel on social media, checked his Facebook and Instagram accounts that were mostly public. Turned out Daniel hadn't recently gone through a breakup at all like Rachel had claimed. In fact, the complete opposite was true. He'd gotten engaged 4 months earlier, back in August. I found his fiance's Instagram account without much difficulty since he'd tagged her in multiple posts. Her name was Emma, and from all her posts, she seemed genuinely nice and normal. Lots of pictures of her and Daniel hiking in state parks, at restaurants trying new foods, at concerts, looking authentically happy together. There was even a Thanksgiving post from just a few weeks ago where she'd captioned it expressing deep gratitude for Daniel and their upcoming future together, with hashtags about being blessed and engaged life. So Rachel had been completely lying to me about Daniel's situation. He wasn't going through any rough patch or difficult breakup. He was happily engaged to someone who clearly had no idea about any of this. And if Emma had no clue that her fiancé was planning to spend Christmas with his ex-girlfriend, well, that seemed like information she absolutely had a right to know before she married this guy. I thought about it for a while, weighing whether I should get involved or just confront Rachel privately. But ultimately, I decided Emma deserved to know the truth. I created a burner Instagram account with a generic username that couldn't be traced back to me, and sent Emma a direct message late that evening. I kept it straightforward and factual, not emotional or accusatory. I introduced myself as the husband of Daniel's ex-girlfriend, Rachel, mentioned that Rachel had invited Daniel to spend Christmas with our family at my parents' house, and suggested she might want to know about this since they appeared to be engaged based on her social media posts. I included my actual phone number at the end if she wanted to discuss it further or needed more information. She responded within about an hour, which told me she'd been online when I messaged. We moved the conversation to text messages since it was easier to have a real conversation that way. Emma had absolutely zero knowledge that Daniel was planning to spend Christmas with Rachel. She'd never even heard Rachel's name mentioned before in any context. Actually, Daniel had specifically told her he was attending a holiday party with colleagues from work on Christmas Day, some annual tradition his department supposedly had. Emma was understandably upset and confused, but also genuinely grateful that I'd reached out to her. We talked on the phone for roughly 30 minutes, and by the time we hung up, I'd extended an invitation for her to join us at Christmas dinner as well. She asked if I was certain about inviting her, whether it wouldn't create an incredibly uncomfortable and awkward situation for everyone involved. I told her honestly that it would probably be extremely awkward and tense, but I was absolutely exhausted from being lied to and manipulated, and I believed we both deserved to understand what was actually happening behind our backs. I told her I wanted the truth to come out in front of everyone, so there could be no more lying or gaslighting. She was quiet for a moment, then agreed to come. The following week proceeded normally on the surface, like nothing had changed. Rachel discussed Christmas preparations constantly, talking about what food we should contribute to the dinner, what time we should arrive, whether we should exchange presents with Daniel since he'd be there. That last suggestion nearly made me laugh out loud at the absurdity, but I managed to keep a straight face. I just kept nodding along, playing the part of the mature, understanding, supportive husband she wanted me to be. Inside, I was counting down the days until Christmas. Christmas Eve arrived, and Rachel was in an exceptionally good mood, better than I'd seen her in months. She kept texting Daniel throughout the day about timing and coordination and logistics. I overheard her on the phone with him that evening around 9 o'clock, confirming he'd arrive at my parents' house around 2 in the afternoon on Christmas Day. She was practically giddy with excitement, giggling at things he said, using this tone of voice I hadn't heard her use with me in a very long time. It made my stomach turn. Christmas morning, we opened our gifts at home before heading to my parents' place, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Rachel had bought me a really nice watch I'd mentioned wanting several months back, something I'd pointed out in a store window once. I'd gotten her a necklace with her birthstone that I'd ordered online. We smiled and kissed and acted like everything was perfectly fine between us, like we were a happy couple celebrating the holiday together. We reached my parents' house around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. My mom had really outdone herself this year with the decorations and food preparation. She'd made a complete traditional turkey dinner with all the fixings you could imagine, 3 different types of potatoes because everyone in the family has different preferences, mashed, roasted, and scalloped, green beans with almonds, homemade dinner rolls that were still warm, a massive green salad, cranberry sauce, both homemade and canned, because my dad insists on the canned kind, multiple pies for dessert, including apple, pumpkin, and pecan. The house smelled absolutely incredible. My dad had claimed his usual spot in the living room with the TV already tuned to football, a beer in his hand. Monica was attempting to control her 2 young kids with limited success, bribing them with cookies to behave. Everything felt normal and comfortable and familiar, and I almost started feeling guilty about what I was planning to orchestrate in a few hours. Almost, but not quite. I kept reminding myself why I was doing this. Daniel showed up at 2:15, fashionably late, but not rudely so. He brought 2 bottles of wine, expensive ones from the look of the labels, and turned on the charm immediately. He complimented my mom on the decorations, thanked my dad for letting him join our family celebration, and within 5 minutes had my mother completely won over. Rachel absolutely lit up the moment he walked through the door, her whole face changing in a way I recognized from old photos of them together in college. She greeted him with a hug that lasted several seconds longer than would be appropriate for just friends, her arms wrapped around him tightly. I shook his hand firmly, looked him directly in the eye, smiled, and told him it was good to see him again. He thanked us profusely for including him and said he really appreciated the invitation and generosity. We all gathered in the living room to chat before dinner. Daniel integrated himself seamlessly into the family dynamic like he'd been coming to these gatherings for years. He was laughing at my dad's terrible jokes, asking Monica intelligent questions about her children, and seeming genuinely interested in the answers, discussing football plays and predictions. Rachel kept finding excuses to position herself physically next to him on the couch, touching his arm whenever she laughed at something he said, leaning into him slightly when she talked. I observed all of it with an outward calm and pleasant demeanor that didn't reflect my actual internal state at all. Inside, I was wound tight as a spring, waiting. At 2:45 exactly, the doorbell rang, right on schedule. I immediately stood up and announced I'd get it before anyone else could move. I walked to the front door, took a deep breath to steady myself, and opened it. Emma was standing there on the porch, wearing a red sweater and dark jeans, holding a bottle of wine, looking nervous, but resolute and determined. She identified herself quietly, and I warmly welcomed her inside, thanking her for coming. I led her down the hallway into the living room where everyone was gathered. The reaction was immediate and dramatic and everything I'd hoped for. Rachel's face drained of absolutely all color, going from her normal complexion to paper white in about 2 seconds. Daniel literally jumped up from the couch so quickly and abruptly that he knocked over his beer bottle, sending liquid spreading across the coffee table. Emma maintained her composure beautifully and explained in a steady voice that she'd been invited, that I'd been kind enough to include her when I learned Daniel would be spending Christmas with his ex-girlfriend and her family. The room fell into complete heavy silence. My mom looked utterly confused, her eyes darting between all of us, trying to understand what was happening. My dad muted the television for the first time all day. Monica's eyes went wide as saucers, and I could see her hand moving subtly toward her phone in her pocket. I knew she'd start recording any second now. Rachel slowly stood up from the couch, her movements stiff and mechanical. She asked me in this carefully controlled voice what exactly I was doing, what was going on. I introduced Emma pleasantly, using the same friendly tone I'd used to introduce Daniel earlier, explaining that she was Daniel's fiancée. I mentioned casually that I didn't think Daniel had informed Emma he'd be spending Christmas with Rachel, and that Rachel hadn't mentioned to me that Daniel was engaged to be married. So I thought it only made sense that we should all spend the holiday together as one big happy group. Be mature about the whole situation. I deliberately used Rachel's exact words from our earlier conversation, making sure to emphasize the word mature slightly. Daniel looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. His face had gone red and blotchy. He started to stammer out some kind of explanation, but Emma cut him off sharply. Her voice was shaking, but she managed to keep it mostly steady as she demanded answers to very reasonable questions. Why had he told her he was attending a work party when he was actually planning to spend Christmas with his ex-girlfriend? Why was he spending the holiday with Rachel and her family without mentioning it to his fiancée? Why did a complete stranger, meaning me, have to be the one to inform her of her own fiancé's actual plans? Daniel tried to claim it wasn't what it looked like, that there was a perfectly innocent explanation for all of this. Emma asked what exactly it was supposed to look like then, because from where she was standing it looked pretty damning. Rachel turned on me, her face now flushed red with anger and humiliation. She accused me of orchestrating this entire thing deliberately to embarrass her in front of my family. I calmly stated that I'd simply invited Emma because she deserved to know where her fiancé actually was and what he was actually doing. Just like I deserved to know that Rachel had been texting her ex constantly for months and telling him she missed their relationship and wondered about what might have been. Rachel's face went from red to pale again, the color draining out. Her voice came out as almost a whisper when she asked if I'd gone through her phone without her permission. I admitted freely that yes, I had gone through her phone, and yes, I discovered quite a few interesting and revealing conversations between her and Daniel. I asked if she wanted me to share them with everyone present. Maybe read some of the messages out loud so my family could understand exactly what had been going on. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling like I was about to do exactly that. My mom finally spoke up, her voice bewildered and concerned. She asked what on earth was happening right now. Could someone please explain? Monica had her phone out now, definitely recording, holding it at an angle that captured most of the room. I didn't stop her. In fact, I was glad she was documenting this. Daniel tried to approach Emma, reaching out toward her and calling her baby in this pleading tone. He begged for a chance to explain everything, insisted that he and Rachel were just friends catching up, nothing inappropriate. He claimed that Rachel had been going through some stuff emotionally and needed support from someone who understood her history. Emma just looked at him with this expression of complete disgust and betrayal. Rachel immediately snapped at Daniel, asking what the hell he was talking about, saying she wasn't going through anything and had no idea what he meant by that. Her voice was sharp and defensive. And just like that, their carefully constructed stories completely fell apart in front of everyone. Daniel was claiming Rachel needed emotional support and was struggling with something. Rachel was claiming Daniel was the one going through a hard time after a breakup. Neither version matched what they'd told other people or what they told me and Emma. They'd both been lying, weaving different narratives to different people, and now they'd been caught in their own web of deception with no way out. Emma looked at Daniel with pure disgust and something like pity. She told him in a clear, firm voice that they were finished, completely done, over. She instructed him not to come home that night, or any night, not to call her, not to text her, that she'd have her brother come to the apartment to collect his belongings within the next few days. She turned to me and thanked me sincerely for telling her the truth, for caring enough about a complete stranger to let her know what was really going on. She apologized for showing up at my family's Christmas and disrupting everything, but said she was genuinely grateful for finally knowing the truth before she'd made the mistake of marrying Daniel. My mom, bless her heart, quietly told Emma she was welcome to stay for dinner if she wanted, that there was plenty of food and she shouldn't have to spend Christmas alone after all this, which made me love my mother even more in that moment, her instinct to care for someone who was hurting. Emma shook her head and said she appreciated the offer, but needed to leave and process everything. She thanked my mom for her kindness, then she walked out the front door with her head held high. Daniel stood there frozen for several long seconds, looking between Rachel and me and my family, like he was trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage this situation. Then he seemed to realize there wasn't, grabbed his coat from the rack by the door, and followed Emma out without saying another word to anyone. The door closed behind him with a decisive click. Rachel stared at me with a mixture of rage and humiliation and something that might have been fear. Her hands were shaking slightly. Before she could say anything, before she could try to explain or defend herself or turn this around on me somehow, I spoke first. I told her calmly and clearly that I wanted a divorce. I informed her that I'd already contacted an attorney earlier in the week and had a consultation scheduled. I said she could stay at her sister's place until we sorted out living arrangements for the apartment. My voice was steady and emotionless, like I was discussing something mundane. She started to say my name, her voice cracking, but I interrupted her. I told her she'd brought her ex-boyfriend to my family's Christmas dinner. She'd lied to me about his situation and circumstances. She'd been emotionally cheating on me for months with constant texting and inappropriate conversations. She'd made me feel crazy and insecure for being uncomfortable with the whole situation when my instincts were absolutely right. So no, we were done. Finished. Over. She looked around the room desperately at my parents, at Monica, at the dinner table still set for a holiday meal that was now completely destroyed. I watched the realization slowly dawn on her face that nobody here was going to take her side or defend her actions. She grabbed her purse from the couch, her movements jerky and uncoordinated, and left without another word. The front door slammed behind her. Christmas dinner was incredibly awkward afterward, but we managed to get through it. My mom kept apologizing repeatedly for not asking more probing questions when Rachel had called about bringing Daniel, saying she should have checked with me first. My dad told me I'd handled the situation well, that sometimes you have to make hard decisions, and I'd done what needed to be done. Monica informed me that the video was already circulating in our extended family group chat, and that literally everyone was supporting me and couldn't believe what Rachel had done. I ended up staying at my parents' house that night in my old childhood bedroom. Rachel sent me 17 text messages over the course of the evening, ranging from angry accusations to apologetic pleas to desperate begging. I only responded to one message, telling her to communicate through my lawyer from now on regarding the divorce. Then I blocked her number. The next day, December 26th, I returned to our apartment with my dad and my brother-in-law as backup to pack my essential belongings. Rachel wasn't there, which was a relief, but she'd left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter where I'd be sure to see it. It said she was sorry, that she never intended for any of this to happen, that things had gotten out of control, and asking if we could please talk face to face. I read it once, felt absolutely nothing, and threw the note in the trash can. A week later, I met with my attorney for a proper consultation. I brought printed copies of all the screenshots from Rachel's phone showing months of inappropriate conversations with Daniel, which my lawyer said would be very beneficial for establishing grounds and for the proceedings. I also had documentation proving I'd paid for approximately 70% of our shared expenses over the 3 years of marriage, including most of the rent, utilities, and groceries, which was relevant for asset division. The lawyer said it should be a relatively straightforward divorce since we had no children and hadn't been married that long. Rachel had moved in with her younger sister who lived across town. She tried reaching out through several mutual friends over the next few weeks, asking them to convince me to give her another chance, to at least hear her out. Most of our friends sided with me completely once they heard the full story of what happened. A handful said I'd been overly dramatic with the whole Christmas ambush and public confrontation, that I could have handled it more privately. But honestly, I couldn't care less what they thought. They weren't the ones who'd been lied to and manipulated for months. Emma reached out to me via text several days after Christmas. She thanked me again for telling her the truth and confirmed she'd officially ended the engagement. She said Daniel had attempted to argue that nothing physical had ever occurred between him and Rachel, that it was purely emotional support between old friends. But Emma said the emotional affair was actually worse in some ways and was more than enough reason to end things. She told me she felt like she'd dodged a bullet, and I had helped her avoid making a terrible mistake. I told her I felt the same way about my situation. Apparently, Daniel completely fell apart psychologically after the breakup and public humiliation. According to mutual acquaintances who knew both him and Rachel, he was blaming Rachel entirely for destroying his relationship with Emma, saying she'd pursued him and wouldn't leave him alone. Meanwhile, Rachel was blaming him for ruining her marriage, saying he'd encouraged her and made her think they could rekindle something. They were both pointing fingers at each other and refusing to take responsibility. They were both correct in their accusations, actually. They'd both made choices that destroyed 2 relationships. It's been about 2 months since that Christmas now. The divorce is proceeding smoothly because Rachel doesn't want to contest anything or fight it out. I think she's too embarrassed and ashamed and just wants the whole thing over with so she can try to move on. We're selling the apartment and dividing assets roughly 60-40 in my favor since I contributed significantly more financially over the years. I've been staying with my parents while I search for a new place to live. And honestly, it's been good for me. Lots of family dinners where I don't have to pretend everything's fine, game nights with Monica and her kids who make me laugh, quiet time to process everything that happened and figure out who I am outside of that marriage. Rachel sent me a lengthy email last week, probably 2,000 words. She apologized extensively for everything, said she'd been confused and made terrible decisions that she deeply regretted. She acknowledged that while she never physically cheated, she completely understood why I felt betrayed and why I couldn't trust her anymore. She said she'd been selfish and hadn't considered my feelings. She asked if someday, maybe in a year or 2, we might be able to be friends or at least be civil. I read the entire email twice, felt a mixture of anger and pity, and didn't respond. Maybe eventually I'll feel differently about that possibility, but right now I just want her completely out of my life. Emma and I actually met for coffee last week at a place downtown. Nothing romantic at all, just 2 people who went through similar experiences, comparing notes and supporting each other. She's doing well, she told me. She started seeing a therapist to process the betrayal and work through trust issues. She's focusing on herself and her own growth and rediscovering who she is as an individual. She thanked me once more for reaching out initially and said if I'd kept quiet to avoid drama, she might have actually married someone who would have continued choosing his ex-girlfriend over her for their entire marriage. We agreed to stay in touch as friends. As for me, I'm doing all right overall. Some days are definitely harder than others, moments where I miss being married or question if I overreacted. But then I remember all those text messages, all those lies, the way Rachel made me feel crazy for having reasonable concerns. I miss being married in the abstract, but I don't miss being married to someone who didn't respect me or our relationship. My family keeps joking that I won Christmas this year, and honestly, they're not entirely wrong. That dinner table scene is definitely going to be discussed and retold for years at family gatherings, probably with increasing embellishment each time. Monica's video didn't go viral on social media or anything like that, but it's definitely been shared extensively throughout our extended family and friend circles. I've heard from cousins I haven't talked to in years reaching out to say they saw what happened and they're on my side. Rachel is apparently mortified and humiliated, barely leaving her sister's apartment. Daniel deleted all his social media accounts entirely. Emma appears to be living her best life based on what I can see on Instagram, posting about solo trips and new hobbies. My dad's reaction right after everything went down has become kind of legendary in our family. After Rachel left that day, after the initial shock wore off and we were sitting down to eat, He came over to where I was standing by the window. He put his hand on my shoulder, looked me directly in the eye, and said that was the most interesting and entertaining Christmas our family had ever experienced. He told me well done, that I'd handled myself with dignity. Coming from my dad, who's usually pretty reserved with praise and emotion, that was basically equivalent to a standing ovation. It meant everything to me in that moment. I know the whole situation was messy and dramatic and probably could have been handled differently, more privately, but I don't regret how it played out at all. Rachel and Daniel created this entire situation through their own choices and deceptions and lies. I just made sure the truth came to light when everyone involved could witness it simultaneously. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable and awkward and ruins holidays. But it's always necessary. And now I'm free to move forward with my life, eventually with someone who will actually respect me and our relationship whenever I'm ready for that again. For now, I'm just focusing on healing and figuring out what I want next. That's enough.